Well, as AI has become more of a growing part of our professional lives, the question has been asked about how much it might impact a thing like the workplace. And that question has seemingly been buried by many members of the C suite up until now. We're starting to hear leaders of companies have comments about just how many of their employees might no longer have a job in the years ahead. To more on that, we're joined by Peter Cappelli, who is a management professor here at Wharton. He's also director of the Center on Human Resources. Peter, great to talk to you again. How are you, sir?
Good. Thank you, Dan.
I guess it's probably not a surprise that at some point we were going to have to see leaders of companies address this issue, because it's just one that is seemingly on the forefront of a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, it's a good thing that they're addressing it. I think, as we'll see in a couple of minutes in the conversation, unfortunately, what they really should be telling people is a lot of "we don't know yet," and I'm not sure what they're telling them is the most useful thing yet. It's kind of scaring people.
Right. Well, but the comments from people like Jim Farley, the Ford CEO, saying half of all white collar jobs will be gone. Is that an overestimate, or is that to a degree somewhat on point?
Well, we've had those kind of forecasts for about 20 years now, and they haven't worked out, right? So I would say if you were a betting person, you would bet against that. And nothing I'm seeing right now suggests that that's going to happen. But, the effects might be very different depending what kind of job you've got.
Why do you think that is? That maybe some of those estimates are maybe a little bit high. What is it about, I guess, the structure of the company, the jobs themselves that you see that is still going to require that human connection?
Well, I think we know very little about how these tools can actually be used. So the story has been driven largely by people who build them, talking about what could be done. So we will all remember by 2019, driverless trucks would have taken over, and you need to get rid of your truck drivers because they were going to be obsolete. And there were companies that actually did that. And then, of course, they got completely surprised when it hadn't happened at all. So, the forecasts have been wildly wrong. And if you are a person concerned about risk, I would not pay much attention to the forecasts because they have been wildly wrong. They've been driven largely by people who build the systems, thinking about what they could do rather than what's cost effective to do and what is sort of reasonable to do, right? So we're only getting a sense of that now.
Is there some of this that we may see companies make some of these moves and then have to do a 180, a U-turn, to bring people back in as they learn what they can and can't use?
Yeah, I understand there's already been a little bit of that in various places, but yes, I think we probably will see that. And I think there's a reason for it that we may have talked about before, and that is, in the finance world, there is a real preference for companies to squeeze down headcount. Part of the reason for that is companies are assessed on profit per employee, profit, cost per employee, everything per employee. So if you can get your headcount down, that's really a nice thing. And employers don't think very much about the costs of losing people. And some of that is because human capital has no accounting value. And so, if you lay people off, usually the investors, if they do anything, they just cheer. Nobody's thinking about what has to happen if, in fact, you fall short of talent. What happens then? We know what the answers are, and they're not pretty, but in the investment world, we're not seeing them. So I would imagine that you probably could bet on some of that happening, yes.
And there are probably, and this may be a question where, it's going to depend on the firm or the sector, but there probably are jobs that as you go along and you look at these different companies, different sectors, that there will be jobs that would be more susceptible than others within the firm to potentially get cut.
Sure, I think that's right. Now, what we're learning is those jobs appear to be the exact opposite of what people said they would be. So, up until just a little while ago, people thought the simple jobs would be the ones most easily replaced. And that is not turning out to be the case. One of the reasons Y is in simple jobs like sorting and coding, right? Or moving data from one pile to another, one set of documents to another. The problem with that is it has to be absolutely right. And to make sure it's absolutely right, you have to build the algorithms, train them on real data to make sure that it can tell what is in pile A and what should be in pile B. And it takes a long time to get that right, and it's really expensive to do. On the other hand, things which are you can do right now with no training is ask the internet to provide a summary of what we know about the tire industry in China, right? Those answers are probably not going to be that great right now. They won't be as good as some expert would give you, but they're cheap and they're free and they're quick, right? So it turns out that if you're doing some knowledge work, maybe those jobs are pretty susceptible. But even there, the reality is nowhere near the hype. So let me give you an example. If you look at computer programmers, which is one of those where people are saying they're just going to be obsolete, right? Well, there have been for a long time tools that would help you automate programming. They'll suggest code that other people have already written on this topic you're trying to do with this question. So that stuff's been around for a while. AI, generative AI, arguably better than that. But when you look at what programmers actually do on their job, it appears they only spend about 30% of their time actually coding.
Right.
So, what are they spending the rest of the time on? Negotiating a budget, talking to their clients and users to see what is it you actually need, negotiating between the budget and the clients. Here's what we think we can do. That's where they're spending their time. So, if AI took over completely the programming task, you still got 70% of the work that so far it looks like people do.
So, what does this potentially mean then as we look down the road for the next generation? Because obviously, we're learning about a lot of this right now. That next generation coming into the workforce, they have to, I guess, if you're in high school now or you're going to college now, you have to have the expectation that AI is going to be part of the mix. But how much could it potentially develop? And I guess to a degree, there's a lot of still unknowns that haven't been answered yet.
Yeah, and I think that is the point. What is a mistake is making a guess and investing a lot of money in that guess. So, saying, for example, they can never automate art. So I'm going into art, and then it turns out they can automate art pretty well. It's just hard to know. So don't place a single bet and say, this is the field I'm going into because, we can't automate it. And some of the ones that we thought they were going to automate pretty easily. It turns out it's hard to do. So I guess I would just not worry about it all that much, trying to guess where the technology will go. I think the problem companies have right now, and I think you hear it from the CEOs, is that they're under pressure to respond to the hype. And the hype is AI is the way to cut headcount. So get busy and do it, right?
Right.
So there was an interesting survey of top executives saying 74% of them said that they felt their job was on the line if they couldn't deliver these cuts, basically. And they can't. They also said about a third of what they're doing with AI is performative. It's not actually doing what they say it's doing, and they're kind of pretending. That doesn't mean they're necessarily lying, but they're counting a lot of stuff as AI, which is not even AI at all, right? So the problem is we don't know. The CEOs are under pressure because the boards in particular think we do know, and so they're responding in ways which are probably going to be dysfunctional.
Peter, great to talk to you and get your insight as always. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dan.
Peter Cappelli, management professor here at the Wharton School and director for the Center on Human Resources.